The meeting of the Shreveport City Council Administrative Conference is now called to order. Councilman Green will give the invocation and Councilman Nicholson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Lord, for this day, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for bringing us here today, and we ask that you would take care of us and let us operate this meeting in a Christ-like manner. Thank you, Lord, for what you've done for us, and we praise you in advance for what you're going to do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag and join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Taylor.
Present.
Councilwoman Fuller. Councilman Nicholson.
Present.
Councilman Butcher.
Here.
Councilman Fleury. Councilman Green.
I'm here.
And Councilman Bowles.
Tomorrow we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the administrative conference and the Shreveport City Council meeting on Tuesday. Does any council member have any awards, recognitions, distinguished guests not to exceed 15 minutes?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
tomorrow I'll be recognized in Project Celebration for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and also the American Cancer Society for Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the Real Men Wear Pink campaign.
Awesome. Awesome. We had a walk this weekend, Project Celebration for Domestic Violence, and it was great. Anyone else? Mayor Perkins, do you have any awards, recognition, distinguished guests not to exceed 15 minutes?
I don't, Madam Vice Chair.
Do you have any communications of the mayor relative to city business?
I don't.
Okay. Any reports? Does any member have questions or concerns relative to property standards? Mr. Green, have any questions of Mr. Green? No one?
Madam Chair, I'll just thank Mr. Green and the other directors who were responsible for fixing the problem at Gilbert and Piermont at my request. I appreciate that getting done.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Green. Did everyone receive the revenue collection plan and implementation report? If they don't have it today, we'll have it tomorrow. Did everyone receive, or is there a surety bond forfeitures report, Mr. City Attorney?
No report.
Are there any public hearings?
There are none.
Mr. Whitehorn, will there be any legislation to be added tomorrow?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. We have the following request to speak. Attorney William Bradford.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, or Chairwoman, and members of the council, Mayor. It's good to see everyone today. We're rising on Ordinance, I believe, 150, which relates to the city right-of-way ordinances as presented. I think it was initially passed as Ordinance 74 of 2021, and the implementation date was postponed at the last meeting, and then now there's an amendment on the agenda. We rise in opposition of the amendment as presented, and it's not any slight against the mayor's office or any members of the infrastructure committee or the city attorney's office. It's just that over the past 6 weeks or so, we've had open conversations with the mayor's office, and we appreciate that, and had very honest and open dialogue about the concerns for both Centerpoint and AEP, as well as some of the other utilities that would be impacted by this ordinance. And following that, and per instructions from the mayor, we were engaged in conversations with the engineering department and provided some technical suggestions, as well as some alternative language that was ultimately discussed with engineering, and that language was used as a basis for further discussions and refinement. And we'd gone through a process of back and forth emails with both engineering, as well as I believe Public Works was involved, or permits was involved, and our teams, both from AEP as well as Centerpoint. We provided revisions and thought we were at a agreeable resolution to the concerns that were contained in Ordinance 74, but ultimately received a new draft a couple of weeks ago from City Legal, and I believe it was intended to be a proposition that would be more palatable to the city council. Our concern is that as utilities, we were not engaged in that portion of the discussion, and so we did provide some general comments back, but it gave us about a 1-week time period to respond to the initial comments provided by the city attorney's office. And so, again, this is not a slight against any department. Everyone has been significantly engaged in this process, but our understanding is that we were working from a certain, I think it's called Caption to the City, version 3, with city input, where we gone in and actually placed in city input and made considerations to what city engineering requested of each of the utilities. Essentially, we'd worked ourselves into an agreement that there is a franchise fee agreement in place, and that provides for certain revenues to the city as well, and certain notice requirements. And if the issue being notice, who's digging what hole, who has ownership and responsibility of the hole, we can fix that. And so the version that we provided to the city and that had been discussed with city engineering, and in our opinion agreed upon, addressed those concerns. As a matter of fact, it included considerations from the city engineering's office. And so to see the new version, it really kind of caught us out of left field, and I think other members of the utility community will talk to that, but we want some consideration and perhaps some discussion to happen on what occurred versus what was provided to the city in our initial discussions versus what appears today on the agenda. So we're glad about the process, but we do have some genuine concerns on what's presented right now for amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say first that I appreciate the administration's taking on this project. The status quo has been that utilities and other service providers have dug up our city streets, and we've not done a very good job at all of holding them to account for surface restoration. So this is a problem that has been in desperate need of a solution. In terms of the details of the legislation that emerges from the process, although of course I'll make an independent assessment before I cast a vote, my inclination is to follow the administration's lead, and I hope that we can come up with a solution that is satisfactory to both industry and the city, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have a process in place that protects the public's interest, and that's what I'd like to see come out of this. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I'm not sure, Mr. Bradford, but I believe the hang-up right now is the $150 fee, permit fee. The franchise agreement, as we've stated, gives the utilities the right to be there. It does not eliminate the need for the permit. And so the permit fee, I believe, is the biggest concern. And the administration feels that we should have that permit fee in place.
Okay. Lieutenant Michael Michael Corbin. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, can we have Attorney Bradford respond to just verify if that's correct, if that is the hang-up?
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, Mr. CAO. That is one of the two largest issues for CenterPoint. I believe the third issue for AEP is the use of the term boring versus excavation. But in speaking to the fee itself, again, the $64,000 question throughout the entire process is why do we have a franchise fee? And it's to alleviate some of the restrictions and costs associated with independently permitting each dig. And so I want to note, and I think that has been one of the major issues, is that CenterPoint alone is paying over $1.5 million a year in franchise fee costs. AEP is even more than that. And so there's a significant revenue cash flowing to the city based on our use of the right-of-way. And so while you do theoretically have, and I mean, again, it's that maybe a legal argument, have the ability to impose additional permit fees, it's a should you in this situation, considering the amount of revenues based on our gross revenues that the city is already collecting. The other issue being that the franchise fee agreements provide for many of the notices as required under the new permit, so it's redundant, and it creates an increased manpower load for, and some of our technical folks from CenterPoint can speak to this tomorrow, it increases their manpower load as well, and that's what was discussed in the meeting with the mayor. And so, again, he was very responsive to what we saw, but what was negotiated, and I think the impetus for today's comment is that what was negotiated is just not what appears on the agenda. And so we want a resolution. We want to provide the city with the solution they need. But yes, the revenue as well as the manpower cost is concerning to both utilities. I can speak for CenterPoint, and I'm sure AEP will speak to the same issue as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So Mr. Bradford, you're saying basically the $150 is where we're kind of at a crossroads, is that?
Correct, because as defined in the ordinance presented and it's on the amendment on the agenda, it's a very broad definition of what's a dig and excavation. And so potentially we're talking additionally hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional costs to each of these utilities. And so it is, by definition, how this amendment defines out what is an excavation, what is a dig. And in AEP's concern is that it discourages boring, which is required in the franchise. So there are some conflicts even with the franchise fee agreements. And so those issues had been worked out through the version 3 that was shared and responded to by the city engineering office, but it doesn't necessarily address that in the amendment that's on the agenda today.
So how long has the franchise fee been in place?
I renegotiated actually CenterPoint's franchise fee, I believe, in 2015 or 16. AEP's has been around for a little longer than that, and that's when they went to 4.5% in CenterPoint, and I believe AEP is at 5%. And so,
and this might be more for the city attorney to answer, but what was the initial purpose of that franchise fee?
Attorney Brown, can you come address this issue, please?
are there any other questions? If not, I'll take my seat.
Not now, thank you.
And a lot of this information was provided by Patrick Furlong, who obviously is not present. But Danielle has been working with Mr. Bradford and Mr. Furlong.
That's correct. I'm sorry, Councilman Butcher, could you repeat your question?
I just basically wanted to know, when the franchise fees, I think Mr. Bradford answered the question about the CenterPoint, but when they were put in place and what the exact reason for those franchise fees are.
The franchise fees were implemented with the applications to give the utility companies the ability to be at the right-of-ways of city-owned property. The problem that we're moving into now is that, yes, they have that authority to be in those right-of-ways. It's just to address this was before me, but to address the concerns that the city was having about individuals who were doing digging and leaving pavement unkept or in a manner that depreciated the life of, whether it be the road, the pavement, what have you, that some of the franchise fee agreements does not directly address. There is some language that could go either way as far as interpretation, but the fees that were generated and the discussions that were had with the franchise fee are pretty much for the right-of-way, the access to the right-of-way, to have that access to those areas.
So not to remedy any subpar work or anything that this legislation is trying to address?
Not directly, no. It's more so to give them the access to those right-of-ways.
And Councilman, I'll say, even if the language is, I haven't read that entire franchise agreement, no, but even if the language is there, Attorney Bradford spoke of notice. Notice is a huge problem that hadn't been happening. So even if you do see redundancy in this legislation, it's because notice wasn't happening. And the portion on the fees absolutely is still asymmetric on the cost that the city is carrying opposed to what we've negotiated with the franchise agreement, and that's the reason why this is necessary.
And I will add, Councilman Butcher, it's my understanding that when the initial, I think it was Ordinance 74 was passed, the council was instructed or informed that that particular legislation, the fees that were generated would pay for itself. So that was one of the balancings that we had to do, because in the conversations with the utilities was that they did not want to pay any type of fees because of the franchise fees that they were paying already. Whereas we also had a situation where we still needed to be able to monitor, hire someone to go through this process and make sure that the notices were happening, someone who was taking care of that information. So eliminating the fee means that that engineering will have to come back to the city for additional funding to support and make sure that it's being enforced.
Well, I'll conclude my remarks on this topic by expressing appreciation for Mr. Bradford's concession that the franchise fees do not foreclose these permit fees. He said there may be a discussion to be had about whether we should or should not, but that's a discussion for the council and the administration to make. And as Ms. Brown is saying, the bottom line is we don't collect some reasonable fee, we're gonna have to come up with money somewhere else to make sure this important service is provided.
And I'll also add, the initial legislation had a $450 project fee that we eliminated and just left the $150 application fee for the permit.
Okay.
But we are still open to negotiation as far as what, a compromise that we could reach. But we had to get it on the agenda so that we wouldn't be in November when the original legislation goes into effect.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any more questions? Michael Corbin.
Good afternoon, Michael Corbin, External Affairs Manager for SWEPCO, 428 Travis Street, Shreveport, Louisiana. I won't go over everything that Attorney Bradford has already said, but I will answer a couple of Councilman Nicholson's questions. And you're correct, there has been damage done to city right-of-ways by some utilities. But not by all utilities, because the nature of the work that each different utility does is different. And SWEPCO feels that we should not all be lumped together. The majority of what SWEPCO does in the right-of-way is replace utility poles that have either broken, been involved in a motor vehicle accident, or just on their regular replacement schedule. There is some vagueness in the proposed legislation about what is a true emergency and who makes that determination of if we go ahead and proceed with work or if we should wait till a permit has been applied for and approved by the city. So we have concerns there. What we would ask is that between now and October 26th, when you take final vote on this piece of legislation, there be an infrastructure committee meeting where we can have some open dialogue back and forth. Very much appreciate Mayor Perkins opening up his staff and allowing us to meet with his staff. We made great progress. But as Attorney Bradford said, what we see reflected on your agenda today in this piece of legislation that's up for introduction is not quite in line with all the conversations we had and with the expectations that we had when we left the rooms.
I appreciate that. Mr. Corbin, while you're here, I'll raise this related issue. You and I have had a couple of emails over the past several months about pole stubs that are left hanging on wires. And you know, once you can not see a problem your entire life, but once you see it once, you see it everywhere. So I see around the city stubs of poles and broken poles that are just left by the new poles. I would be delighted if there were a regular process for making sure that we don't leave broken stubs hanging off power lines and other lines above ground.
Thank you. And that's really caused by a couple of things. AT&T and SWEPCO own equally about the same number of poles in the city of Shreveport. On our poles, if our lines are always at the top, AT&T, Comcast, other communications companies have those lower lines. If we need to replace a pole or we need to upgrade a pole, then we put our new pole in. We inform the other utilities that we're going to be doing some work there. But if they have not released their wires, then we top out the pole and just leave their wires on it. We abandon that pole and take our tag off of it, put our new pole in. So at that point, it's up to the AT&Ts, the Comcast, fiber companies that may be on that pole to come in and rehang on our new pole and remove the old pole.
Perhaps that's something that could be discussed in the infrastructure meeting as well.
Yeah, I think so. It would be good to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes. Councilwoman
Mayor,
Brewer.
are you amenable to us having an infrastructure meeting, discuss this further in the next week or so?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
My only comment to the infrastructure meeting is, it's my responsibility, and it'll become clear to you all as well, to make sure that our interests align with the citizens of Shreveport. Private entities do great work, happy that you guys are here, but they're gonna have some interests that's gonna conflict, and I think that's why we're seeing, even though we made progress, we won't completely close this gap. So, by all means, but, by all means.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that every time we brought this back up, that's been when we when we voted on the original, this is amending, that was one of the things is the longer we delay getting something on the books that we can work with, the more work we have going on that we have no inventory of.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to maintain situational awareness of our streets at the same time that we have citizens complaining about all of the cuts into our roads, on top of the other damage that we have. I'll get something on the books, but we're gonna try to just maintain some pragmatism about how we move forward on this.
Yeah, and there, I mean, we are voting on October 26th, but to council, there is a cost in our delay. And we've been doing this for over a year and a half now, so we can, I hope that you can come up with some ways to reconcile if there's any differences out there, but there is a cost to us waiting on this.
What's the effective date of the original legislation is November?
Don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, we'll get back with you on that. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
It's November 1.
So November 1st. So, okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else?
That's all of the public comments. We have the following executive appointments to be considered tomorrow. Shreveport Civil Service Board, Lieutenant Michael Carter. Zoning Board of Appeals, Clorinda Henderson. And I believe Ms. Henderson is here, if you would come down, Ms. Henderson. Downtown Development Authority, Chase is at Boynton. And Municipal Fire and Police Civil Service Board, Deidre Lewis Robertson. I believe Ms. Robertson spoke at the last meeting. Good afternoon, Ms. Henderson.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Henderson is here for the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you all have any questions of Ms. Henderson, you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. You don't have to be scared, because I know you're not.
I'm just retired. I retired from the tax assessor's office after serving 40 years. And now I'm just at home in the flower garden.
Well, thank you for your willingness to serve. I believe her resume was attached to the agenda. So, anybody have any questions? Thank you. There are no other items under consent agenda for introduction or to be adopted. Mr. Whitehorn, please proceed to regular agenda legislation.
Resolutions on second reading, final passage. Resolution 119, encouraging the Metropolitan Planning Commission to place a moratorium on the issuance of any occupational license and certificates of occupancy for liquor stores and retail stores of alcohol, liquor, other than renewal for a period of 12 months. Resolution 120, you want me to just continue?
Yes.
Yeah. Resolution 122 authorizes the mayor to execute a cooperative purchasing agreement between the city of Shreveport and the city of Alexandria. Resolution 123 authorizes the mayor to execute an agreement between the city of Shreveport and Shreveport NAACP, Inc. Resolution 124 establishes an intergovernmental committee and to otherwise provide with respect thereto. Resolution 125, recognizing Project Celebration for its work to prevent and to assist the victims of domestic violence and to support Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Resolution 126, to recognize October 2021 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Shreveport and to recognize the Real Men Wear Pink campaign in their fight against breast cancer. And Resolution 127, celebrating the Boy Scouts of America Troop 15 100-year reunion.
Is there any discussion on any of them? Councilwoman Fuller.
Thank you, Chairwoman. The Boy Scouts will hopefully have some representation here tomorrow to lead the pledge. I
Okay.
talked to Chairman Fleury about it, but I said I might forget, so now everybody knows. Thank you.
Madam Chair, real quick on
Yes.
124. Mr. Latier, aren't there some issues with this as far as that for us to involve the parish with this interagent? Don't they have to do something on their end? Have y'all been working on that?
That's correct, the parish does. We're probably gonna have to postpone it.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, thank you.
I think I skipped 124. Do you need me to read it?
You read that one.
You read it?
You read
I
it.
did?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I missed it.
Councilman Nicholson.
Madam Chair, on Resolution 119, I'll just reiterate briefly my view that a moratorium for a period of 1 year to have another look at the way that we approve packaged liquor stores in this city seems to me to be something that we ought to consider doing. If a majority of the council thinks 12 months is too long, I'd rather have half a loaf than none, and so I'd be happy to have a moratorium for 6 months. My overall purpose in supporting this legislation is to give us an opportunity to rectify the difficult reality that for generations packaged liquor stores have been littered in socioeconomically disadvantaged neighborhoods. We're all aware of the negative consequences of concentrations of liquor stores in those communities, and this is the best way that I and Councilwoman Taylor could come up with to address that very serious problem. Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
While he's coming up, Madam
Yes.
Chair, there's several other aspects of this legislation that concern me, and I think we've talked about it as far as maybe spelling out a few more things. I'm not opposed to a 6-month moratorium, but I want it, I just don't want it to come across as that I've gotten several calls from bar owners, I've gotten several calls from the Brookshires, of course, call me. I think Mr. Brookshire likes you a lot.
I buy a lot of his groceries, Councilman. I hope you like it.
So obviously, what we said the other day is being watched by people outside of Shreveport. So I want to just make sure that we do this and get the end result that I think we're all looking for without damaging businesses. So if we want to change it to 6 months, that's fine. But I also would like for us to maybe go through some of the verbiage in it as well. But that's just my 2 cents worth.
I think, you had something? Okay. I think one of the major concerns that I had, Councilman Butcher, was the proliferation of liquor stores in lower income neighborhoods. Standalone liquor stores. It's a real serious problem.
I agree with
within the city. And then when you look at a number of studies, you will find that the consumption of alcohol is not consumed in those neighborhoods. It would be in those neighborhoods with a higher income. But yet the proliferation of the liquor stores are in those communities. And that's a real problem for me. I understand about the Brookshires and all of those stores right there, because it's a difference for me if liquor is sold in those stores on that on-site parking lot versus being standalone in the middle of a neighborhood. I will give you my neighborhood, one portion of my neighborhood that I represent. When I drive in to MLK off of Shreveport Blanchard Highway and David Raines, that's the first liquor store. Then the store to the side, it serves liquor. If I go on down, there's some more liquor. If I turn to the right, there are 2 more places. We are actually voted to shut down the liquor store on the other end. Then you get to the corner. What I don't have is a grocery store or anything of that particular magnitude. If I go through Allendale, when I go here and part of Queensboro, the part of Queensboro that is in my district, it's a liquor store right here, it's one right here. I'll center it right there around residential. So I'm looking at more of the residential component and the proliferation of those stores versus not having liquor stores. I'm not anti-liquor, have your drink, enjoy it. I just do not want that my communities to be saturated with nothing but that. And so oftentimes that's what we have. Because again, if you go and you look at the last study, I believe I looked at one by the United Health Foundation in 2020. You're going to find again one of the things that they're talking about as one of their goals is the regulations of how we regulate those stores within our area. So that has a lot to do with zoning, and it's not something that this council has done. This council has been very active in going in and honoring the constituents of this community. They've been very active in doing that, more so than any other council that I've ever seen, and I can appreciate that. But I think that we have to take that look that when residents come down and they fight against that within their district, those are the things that we're going to have to look at. who is it targeting? You know, in my area, it may say liquor. In a more affluent area, it may say wine and spirits. You know, what are we doing? What messages are we sending? So I'm not looking to hurt economic development, but I'm also not at the same point want to go and encourage this level, you know, of marketing within the inner city.
And I respect that. I think, though, that on the face value of the resolution and the perception that was given by the resolution, that is what happened. And I think the question that was asked about the Brookshires in specific, and Councilman Nicholson saying that, yes, it would impact it, that had a ripple effect. And so I think that if you explain it, like as I talked to Mr. Clark that afternoon about it, what you're trying to do is you're doing a moratorium to make our liquor laws better in the city of Shreveport, then that's fine, but that's not the way this is perceived. And so, you know, I think a little bit more conversation on this, a 6-month moratorium. Mr. Clark, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you and I talked, and 6 months would possibly work for what the two council members are wanting to do. I just, all I'm asking is that we look at it, and we all get on the same page, but we explain to the citizens and to the business community and to businesses coming in that this is not a moratorium. We want your business here. We don't want you going to Blanchard. We don't want you going to Stonewall. They can't do it in Stonewall. We don't want you going to we don't want you going to Bossier. We want you here. So anyway, I understand where you're coming from. I had a call the other day about one on the line of my district and Mr. Nicholson's district. And we don't need any more. There's one right across the street from where the person's wanting to put it. I understand that. I was just in Queensboro about 30 minutes ago. I was just in Cedar Grove about an hour ago, riding down the side streets, not down Line Avenue and Jewella. So I see what goes on in the city, and I see the impacts of what goes on. So I'm with y'all on this, but I just want us to maybe change some of the language in the resolution.
I don't know where I start at, but
Sorry for making you stand.
oh, no problem at all. I need
You have
to.
some Councilwoman
Can
Fuller.
I ask a question that might be a good lead-in, or it might just throw everything off the rails, but do you mind? I brought headache medicine for you anyways.
You're fine with me, Councilwoman.
A friend of mine who's in computer science said that originally, like historically, land use code logic was the basis for some of your original computer codes. So when you look at the code, it's a logic, right? When you make changes to something, it can change other things. So one of the reasons for wanting the moratorium is that if you have new information coming in while you're trying to study something, it changes your control group, right?
Correct. And I totally agree with you. I think that, you know, in the 25 years that I've been involved with the Metropolitan Planning Commission, I shared this with former Councilman Michael Corbin because he was here doing some of that time. All over the city, in the affluent areas, in the impoverished areas, in the economically challenged areas, when you bring up liquor stores, there's always opposition, there's always concern for how liquor stores impact and influence young people as they're having to walk by liquor stores on their way home. We've never come up with a viable solution. We've experimented over the years. At one point, in order to get rid of liquor stores in economically disadvantaged areas, we created a classification of special exception uses that in order to sell liquor in the city of Shreveport, you would have to have a special exception use approval, and there was a 0 time frame. If you shut down, you lost that special exception use, even if you were non-conforming, and you could not reestablish without securing that again. That did not work. I mean, it's just a continuation of councils and MPC boards trying to come up with a basis, with an understanding of what can we do to find meaningful locations for liquor stores. I don't think anybody is anti-liquor. I'm not one of these people that have gotten too old to do anything else, and now I'm trying to shut down all the liquor stores. I don't think anybody is with that attitude. I just think that liquor stores have negative connotations. I was talking to my colleague across the river in Bossier, and Bossier is much more restrictive than the city of Shreveport. Bossier only allows liquor stores in 3 areas, in the heavy commercial areas, B3 and B4, and their racetrack district out, by Louisiana Downs. And they had even started to address bars because bars are very impacted also. So I don't think by us reviewing our liquor laws, and we're the only city, I think, in the entire state of Louisiana that has physical separation, that requires, I remember we had a project that was trying to do deliveries, but you could not do deliveries because of our ABO laws. So it may be time, and that's y'all's decision, it may be time to stop and reflect and look at what we're doing. I think we are very anti-business. I think we're not supportive of the innovations that are coming in. I think we have a very archaic liquor ordinance that may need an opportunity to be reviewed to bring it back up, or bring it at least up to 20th century, Councilwoman Fuller, with my headache medication. But it may be time to do that. We've never done that. We piecemeal too much. And this is one that we can't piecemeal. This is one we need to really address and come up with viable solutions.
I think it also presents another opportunity for us to have conversations with our distributors, Councilwoman Fuller, in that sense of when we talk about opportunity, maybe opportunity in a different way of what we're looking at when we're doing this 6-month moratorium. Because I think there are some other different caveats that we're not seeing when it comes to the distribution as such. So I'm more than welcome and amenable to that. But I definitely want us to study and look at our zoning laws when it comes to those liquor stores in those areas.
Madam Chair, just one final note. I think we need to, at some point, I don't know where this needs to start, if it needs to be legal or if it needs to be the Public Safety Committee or working with the MPC, but we do need to look at the overall ABO and liquor in the city of Shreveport. And I think that one thing that Mr. Clark said to me that changed my opinion a little bit the last council meeting after we met is, what was your comment that every time we go out for a liquor store, there's, what did you say? Bloodshed.
A bloodshed. That's a bloodbath.
It's a
y'all
bloodbath.
don't see the cruelty and the sentiments of the neighborhoods like the MPC board has to endure. It's never pleasant.
Right.
And if there's something at this point that we can do with this piece of legislation, then I'm for it to help alleviate that in the future. Not only just to keep the liquor stores out of the impoverished areas, but also to make sure that we're growing, but we're growing in the right way. So,
Correct.
Well, I guess my only other comment on this issue, in response to what Mr. Clark has said, is that we had a conversation about physical separation a year or two ago, and I mean, the most anti-business aspect of our liquor laws is physical separation. It means that a liquor store can't sell other products, and so it contributes to the problem, Councilwoman Taylor, that I think caused you and I to bring this legislation in the beginning. We got a whole lot of pushback from the people that benefit from the physical separation law when we discussed that a couple of years ago. But I'd like to see, as part of the study that the MPC conducts, if we hopefully pass this 6-month moratorium, a look at that. And what is the rationale? Is it true that in the 90s some guys who own liquor stores got together and convinced the council to pass ordinance to give them a monopoly? Because that's what I've been told. And if there's not a principled reason from the city's perspective to maintain that rule, perhaps we should consider doing away with it so that things like Corks and Cuts in your district, Councilman Butcher, can sell liquor, and so that liquor stores that exist can sell other products. I've not gotten my mind around what reason there is from the public's perspective for that sort of archaic rule.
And I never got my head wrapped around that either, Councilman Nicholson, because when you're talking to planners and executive directors around the state, and you mention physical separation, they ask you, what is that? And in any city in the state of Louisiana, so I mean, it does not appear that even across the river that all of a sudden by not having physical separation that crime is skyrocketing.
Well, I'm working hard to get a horse head delivered to my house before I get off the council, so
I was just thinking, I was like,
we'll see if I'm successful or not.
I think that if you had counted to 10, you still would have said it the same way. Yeah, right now, we allow liquor stores in B3, B4 and B3, right?
That's
or
Bossier.
C3 and C4.
That's Bossier. We allowed in about 10 different districts.
So not just commercial 2.
They're all in
4.
commercial districts, but we allowed in industrial districts, the CUC, the C. They're with special use permits. The only place that's allowed by right is in the C4 district was the heavy commercial district that we created with the UDC.
So
But-
some of this comes down to where you have like a major thoroughfare that allows for a higher intensity use, like a C3, where that
Right.
special use is allowed, even though there's no buffer between the residential and the C3.
Right.
Which is just another disenfranchisement on those
Absolutely.
communities.
And those were the things that I think, Councilwoman Fuller, that a moratorium would allow a study to address is how far do we really need to be from residents? And I think that's part of the problem that we talk about in the disenfranchised neighborhoods is that because of the way situations evolved over the years and the fact that zoning ordinances were not strongly enforced in certain areas of the city, that you have most liquor stores actually back up to residents,
Right.
as opposed to in other areas that they're basically out on the major corridors and so forth, and there's separation and there's buffering between.
I'm finding that planners coming out of school right now are being taught that several of the traditional land use codes were discriminatory in nature and intentionally so.
Absolutely.
Well, I think they look at the supply and demand, how everything was structured, and is the demand really worth the supply in that part? And so the moratorium will just give us the opportunity to explore that more and look at ways that we can go over and change our zoning laws to create some level of equity in the city.
And if I may answer Councilman Butcher's question before I sit down so Councilman Nicholson can leave. I think that if there is a 6-month moratorium, we would just deal strictly with where liquor stores should be located. Then after that, possibly we could get into the physical separation and other issues that are outdated and that are working negatively against the progress of our city.
Well, the physical separation to me is kind of a no-brainer, really. I mean, it's something I think the council could do without even the MPC's study. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you can go to Blanchard and buy, I'm gonna have a horse head too, but, that you can go to Blanchard and buy, at the Walmart, there's liquor on the shelf, and you can go to Brookshire's over in South Bossier, and there's liquor on the shelf right next to the, to Brownie
Absolutely.
Mix. So, I mean,
Well, I mean,
Say the brownie mix.
yeah.
I was going to say the diapers, but but look, I guess the other issue is that physical separation excludes responsible retailers, right? Walmart, Brookshire's, Albertsons, they're not going to sell to minors. They're not going to allow problems on their property, and so it takes them out of the mix of commerce for reasons that really don't seem to serve any public purpose.
I agree.
If I could chime in for 1 second, I would say one thing that we're seeing from an economic development standpoint as well with liquor stores and other like businesses is that, and I hope y'all keep this in mind when we're thinking through this, but it also creates conditions that ward off other investments in communities. And I have a ton of pride in our community, and so does likely every tree porter that's listening in. of our neighborhoods, we can do better than just liquor stores and other, businesses that are kind of that occasionally will bring down the value of a neighborhood and again, ward off other economic development opportunities. And we often hear from citizens, why don't I have A, or why don't I have B, or why don't I have C? So as, myself and our ED department go out and talk to businesses, oftentimes they will point to, the conditions of the neighborhood and say, this is why. So, in thinking about these reforms that we want to make going forward, and we have a unique opportunity, by the way. In January, the MPC comes under the city of Shreveport. We have a unique opportunity, but I want us to consider that having a more diverse economy, especially at the micro level within our neighborhoods, to make all of our neighborhoods as strong and as enticing as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else? Mr. Whitehorn, would you proceed with the introduction of resolutions not to be adopted prior to October 26th?
Resolution 128, approving an annual payment in lieu of tax in accordance with a memorandum of understanding between the Shreveport Home Mortgage Authority and SPC Development LLC.
Any discussion? Mr. Whitehorn, would you proceed with the introduction of ordinances not to be adopted prior to October 26, 2021?
Ordinance 145, an ordinance authorizing an encroachment into the city's public right-of-way located at 629 Spring Street, as more fully described herein, and to authorize the mayor or his designee to execute an encroachment permit with Shreveport Bossier Convention and Tourist Bureau. Ordinance 146, amending the 2021 airport enterprise budget. Ordinance 147, amending the 2021 general fund budget. Ordinance 148, amending section 10-66 of chapter 10, article 4, division 2 of the city of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinances with respect to class 1 alcohol beverage handling employee cards. Ordinance 149, amending section 10-69 of chapter 10, article 4, division 2 of the city of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinances with respect to the fee and term for alcoholic beverage handling employee cards. Ordinance 150, to revise chapter 78, article 4, streets, sidewalks, and other public places, construction, excavation of the city of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinances relative to construction, excavation, and bores in the city of public right-of-way, and to otherwise provide with respect thereto. Ordinance 151, to amend chapter 102, article 2 of the city of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinances relative to vehicle for hire license.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the 148, is that in reference to what we spoke about at the last meeting, trying to get the ABO, another class there of ABO?
That's correct.
Okay. So this will help with some of the issues that we've been seeing here recently.
That's correct. Would you like Lieutenant Glass Bradley to come up and Attorney Douglas to explain? You want to wait till later in the process?
If he didn't, that'd be nice, but we don't go over it tomorrow.
Good afternoon. So in regards to that change, it would help out with the Class A, Class B cards, where the denial for the restaurants, package stores, so they won't have to be in violation of state law.
So this is exactly what you were wanting and talking about at the last meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank y'all for moving fast on that, the police department and the administration and city attorney. I just wanted clarification that that's what we were doing.
Will you explain to me what does this legislation do?
Okay, we had a few applicants that were convicted felons, or some were on probation and parole. According to state law, that'd be chapter 26. and it's going to be subsection Delta. It's stating if the applicant's business is to be conducted wholly, partly by one or more managers, agents, servants, employees, or other representatives, those persons shall process qualifications required of the applicant, shall furnish verification suitably in accordance with paragraph H. However, convicted felons may be employed by the applicant if the applicant's business, alcoholic beverages are not the principal commodity sold, handled, or given away. So basically what that's saying is, if alcohol is your principal sale, you can't be a convicted felon.
Not at a bar,
Not at a bar, package store, that's,
but yes at a restaurant.
but yes at a restaurant, yes at a grocery store, any place where the main commodity is not alcohol.
And that's the distinction that the police department is comfortable making. You don't want, sounds like you don't want felons at bars serving alcohol, is that right?
Well, that's state law, they can't be.
Yeah, okay,
They
all right,
can't
well, that's
work
why I'm
there.
asking.
Yes.
It's just getting our ABO back into line with the state.
Okay.
So,
And what's the consequences, Lieutenant Glass Bradley?
the consequences, suspension, denial, and your permit can be revoked if you have a convicted felon working inside a business where you're as a bar.
That's the
or-
owner of the business, Councilman.
So
That's the owner of the business.
He can lose his permit.
License with no.
So are the two applicants that have come before us recently, were they both wanting to be waiters in a restaurant?
Well, one of them, she applied to be a waiter in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So with the new ordinance proposed, she will be able to get a Class B and work in that restaurant. However, the young gentleman, he will not be able to continue to work at that bar. He should. So when we denied him, is because felony probation, convicted felon. He doesn't even qualify for as the state being able to work in that bar.
Okay.
So that bar can be held liable and lose their permit for him just being working there. So there was the conflict with our ordinance.
Okay, well, I just recall that he had a really fairly serious and very recent criminal history. So she was a sympathetic case. He was not really, based on what I read, so.
That was the last council meeting.
That sounds like, yes, ma'am, that sounds like a good solution to me. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Chief?
2022 budget ordinance is not to be adopted no later than December 15, 2021. Ordinance 152, adopting the 2022 capital projects fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 153, adopting the 2022 Riverfront Development Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 154, adopting the 2022 General Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 155, adopting the 2022 Retained Risk Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 156, adopting the 2022 Metropolitan Planning Commission Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 157, adopting the 2022 Community Development Special Revenue Fund budget. Ordinance 158, adopting the 2022 Grants Special Revenue Funds budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 159, adopting the 2022 Shreveport Redevelopment Agency Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 160, adopting the 2022 Downtown Entertainment Economic Development Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 161, adopting the 2022 Golf Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 162, adopting the 2022 Airports Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 163, adopting the 2022 Water and Sewerage Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 164, adopting the 2022 budget funding contractual services provided to Sport Tran by the Metro Management Association, Inc. Ordinance 165, adopting the 2022 Downtown Park and Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 166, adopting the 2022 Convention Center Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 167, adopting the 2022 Convention Center Hotel Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 168, adopting the 2022 Debt Service Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 169, adopting the 2022 Solid Waste Enterprise Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. Ordinance 170, adopting the 2022 Street Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein. And Ordinance 171, adopting the 2022 Diversion Program Special Revenue Fund budget, appropriating the funds authorized therein.
Mr. Whitehorn, are there any questions? Discussion? Mr. Whitehorn, would you proceed with ordinances on second reading and final passage?
Ordinance 122, declaring the city's interest in certain vacant land and surplus, and our intention to transfer certain vacant land acquired by Shreveport Public Assembly and Recreation to Shreveport Commons, Inc. There is one amendment in the CEA.
There's one amendment.
Let me go to the amendment. The amendment deletes and removes the files of the original proposed facts ordinance number 122 of 2021 and substitutes the attached amendment number 1 to ordinance number 122 of 2021, as well as the corresponding cooperative endeavor agreement. This amendment removes extraneous language not intended to appear in the text of the fact sheet, ordinance or the CEA, particularly any reference to the term donation, and replace it with the term transfer to be in accordance with the Louisiana Constitution, Article 714C. Included language that specifies how the CEA is referenced throughout the document. Amend the language regarding how the city may terminate the CEA and include a revisionary clause to protect the city's interests.
That amendment was adopted at the last meeting.
Okay.
On 122.
Yes.
Right.
That should be on my.
And
But that's not,
he hadn't read 123 yet.
that's what I was concerned.
You want me to read the agreement?
No, I was concerned about 123.
Thank you.
We're not worried about
I think
122.
a better statement is you don't
It's the
want to
next
read the
one.
agreement. That's what it's. Okay, ordinance 123.
Ordinance 123, declaring the city's interest in certain vacant land as surplus, and our intention to transfer certain vacant land to the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce and to otherwise provide with respect thereto. There is also one amendment in that one.
That's what I ain't understand. That's the amendment I'm asking about. This amendment does what?
The amendment on 123?
Chairman
Yes.
Yes.
or Chairwoman, we have a meeting tomorrow to further discuss this, so it might be different again by tomorrow.
Okay.
Entirely different.
All right.
So the amendment may be amended?
Yes.
Okay.
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 Madam Chair, I'll just say, because I've had some discussions with chairman and board members, that I think the consensus of the council is that if we can work out an appropriate agreement, we'd like the chamber to have this property, but we all want to make sure that we appropriately protect the public's interest. And I know that's what Councilman Fuller and the other participants in that meeting tomorrow will be working on doing. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Ordinance 141, amending the 2021 budget of the Riverfront Development Fund. Ordinance 142, amending the 2021 budget for the Community Development Special Revenue Fund. Ordinance 143, amending Chapter 50, Article 4 of the City of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinance relative to curfew for juveniles. Ordinance 144, to add new sections 50-155 to 50-157 to Chapter 58, Article 4, Division 4 of the City of Shreveport, Louisiana Code of Ordinances relative to adopt a bus stop shelter program. Ordinance 124, zoning case number 21-76-C, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the City of Shreveport Unified Development Code by rezoning property located at the southwest corner of Mowland Street and Arkansas Avenue, Shreveport, Caddo Parish, Louisiana, from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C3 General Commercial District. Ordinance 125, zoning case number 21-100-C, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the City of Shreveport Unified Development Code by rezoning property located at the southeast corner of Piermont Road and Willard Avenue, Shreveport, Caddo Parish, Louisiana, from R-1-7 Single Family Residential District to C-1 Neighborhood Commercial District.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance 125 is a request for a rezoning for a piece of property in my district just to the south of Piermont. On one side, there's already a commercial development, but the piece of property at issue in this ordinance is right next to a residential street. I visited the property, walked it with the owner and the architect, and also spoke to a couple of elderly neighbors on that street who have lived there for many years and expressed understandable concern about traffic. I've had some conversations with Mr. Clark, and they're going to work on this a bit more, so I'll ask you to join me in postponing this legislation tomorrow.
Madam Clerk, is there any table legislation to be removed from the table today?
None that I'm aware of.
So we have one alcoholic beverage appeal today to consider. Mr. Corey Moore.
Madam Chair, is this on today's agenda? Do we do them today, or do we do them tomorrow? I don't know. Okay.
It's today. The alcohol beverage, they're typically handled at administrative conferences, and our office spoke to him, and he said that he would be.
What? Okay.
He says that he had it in his calendar, he forgot, and he wants to know if we can do it tomorrow.
We can't hear.
She's on the phone with him. He had forgot that it was today and is asking if it can be handled tomorrow.
Well, let me just, we've heard from the police department, they told us that under state law, he can't hold the license that he's requested and that it's illegal for him to do so. So my inclination, if he was given proper notice, is to proceed and deny the appeal so we can get it off our docket.
So we can vote to deny today?
Can we vote to deny today?
That's up to y'all.
You guys can.
I mean, if y'all want to do it with him present or without him, well,
I mean, it's illegal under state law
Right,
for him to do it, so
understood.
I move that we deny the appeal.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second.
So let's vote. So yes, we're denying it.
Yes is a denial. Is that how the vote works?
Yes, the motion was to deny the appeal, so yes vote would
is a vote.
deny
Yeah.
his appeal.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
Just before we finish this up, if we were to vote the other direction and uphold the appeal, then we're in violation of state law.
That's what it
Correct.
sound like.
I'm sorry.
We're in violation of state law if we allow him to have the ADO card.
Mhm.
According to what?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so,
I'd say yes.
Specifically because it's an alcohol-based business, the majority of the sales come from alcohol.
It's a bar.
Instead of it being a
Yeah.
restaurant that also serves alcohol.
Or a
the
grocery
percentage.
store.
Or a grocery store.
I just wanted that to be on the record.
Right, thank you.
So we need to,
Go ahead.
I guess my only question was, did we want him to be present to ask any questions, or he can go ahead and just confer with Bradley if he needs to? I'm just making sure.
Didn't he
we're all
come
on the same
before?
page.
he's, well, look, I mean, he said he had it in his calendar and he forgot, and
Okay.
he's not entitled to under state law. so-
Is this the same gentleman that spoke 2
Yeah.
weeks ago? So we've heard from him.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've heard from him.
Okay.
Okay, let's vote.
Do you need to get a motion on that?
The motion.
Can y'all go back over there? I mean, we're supposed to vote no?
Yes.
Yes.
That was supposed to be.
You're supposed to vote yes.
If you agree.
If you agree.
To deny
Who's
his
on
appeal.
first?
Motion passes 6. And so we were, the ABO appeal of Mr. Amanda Smith, that's postponed until March 21st.
We can't hear
You
you.
gotta speak in the
I'm
mic.
sorry.
The MPC case number 21101-C, appeal to consider tomorrow. We have no property standards and ZBA appeals to consider today. We have a Valentine ambulance appeal to consider tomorrow. Are there any reports from officers, boards, and committees? Is there a clerk's reports?
We received a letter of appointment for Miss Kathleen Malone on October 7th. She's subject to confirmation on October 26th to the Downtown Development Board.
So we have a request from the city attorney to go into executive session to discuss the following: Shannon Hicks versus City of Shreveport, Louisiana First Judicial District Court.
That's correct.
Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Chair, I was out for a while. Would y'all go back over everything y'all talked about? while I
No,
was gone?
sorry. Take it over time. You want to go back and review. Let's vote. Do you want to do the executive session in here?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, do you need to vote?
I'll go.
Okay. Thank you. Let's clear the chamber.